Hello everybody, welcome to this week's live stream. I've had a few new subscribers to the channel recently, so welcome on board. Thanks for subscribing and all that. If you're new to this, normally do this every Friday at 2:30 UK time, just as the US markets are officially opening, and we take a look at the major stuff, indices, FX, gold, oil, silver, Bitcoin. That's it. And then if there's any stuff you want looking at, for those of you who are here live, if you could put it in the chat, that would be great, and we'll take a look at that. We've had the payrolls, the non-farm payrolls in the last hour. And here's the move. This is the NASDAQ. So the NASDAQ was trading at 21,645 before the payrolls came out. Payrolls came out, and we're 120, 130 points higher so far. Let's see what happens. Quite a bit of volatility yesterday. We'll take a look at this in a bit more detail. I've had an okay trading week. I made money on gold and silver. No, silver. The NASDAQ this week. I was in the NASDAQ trade from, I think, last Friday. I was in that trade and I came out of it yesterday on this sell-off. But I still think there are opportunities there. What did the payroll say? Well, I asked ChatGPT. Of course, we don't need to think anymore, do we? We can just ask some AI to give us the answer, and I'm sure that's all going to go swimmingly well in the years ahead. So 139,000 jobs added. Expectation was for 130,000. Unemployment rate held steady at 4.2%, according to ChatGPT, and blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, that was it. What does it mean for the Fed? Fed policy likely to stay steady. Resilient labour markets, dollar strengthened, stocks rallied a bit. There we go. Fair enough, isn't it? So that's it. Let's get into it. But I think there's, the recoveries in stock markets are still going strong. What's the DAX doing? The DAX hit all-time highs again yesterday. S&P and NASDAQ still a bit off the all-time highs, but strength there. So yeah, quite a bit to look at. Let's take a look. Before we do all that, let's get the housework done. Housework? Is it house? No, it's not housework, is it? Housekeeping. What are we talking about? Let's do a risk warning. This presentation is only for educational purposes. It does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones accepts no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets, CFDs, futures, foreign exchange work, and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Trading is risky. Okay, I run a WhatsApp group. We'll talk about that during the break. I haven't looked at the economic calendar, have we? We've had a busy week last week. What's on the calendar for next week? Let's see. Is there anything major? Let me drag this across and we'll have a look. What have we got next week? China inflation on Monday morning, early hours Monday morning. UK unemployment on Tuesday. US inflation on Wednesday. That could be a big one potentially. So that's an hour before the official US market opens on Wednesday, so that is definitely one to watch. Thursday, bit of PPI data. Friday, not very much. So for my money, Wednesday is the big one next week with US inflation data out. So I think that's the one to watch next week, but a quieter week next week than the one we had this week. Okay, let's take a look. Let's start off with US stock markets. Let's start off with the S&P 500. I think we all know what markets have been through over the last few months. Big sell-off and the big bounce back. So here we are. The S&P is trading at 6,000 at the moment. The highs from Feb are 6,100. So it's only, 100 points away from those highs. It's more than that, isn't it? 61.45. So 150 points away. So less than 3% away from the all-time highs. And I think this is the question for US markets now. I think those all-time highs have clearly acted as a magnet. Are we going to take out the all-time highs? And we can start the next great bull market for US stocks, go all in and retire in a few years. Or Is this just a bounce before the market runs out of steam and tanks again and sells off? I don't know, but at the moment, I'm trying to see where we, if we go back, let's go back to 2022, is it? So 2022, we had the all-time high in Jan, the all-time high for then. Market sells off, rallies in March, but then turns lower, before the market, of course, turned it around and the bull market carried on. So I think that's the question at the moment. Are we going to see those highs taken out? I think we will. But if you thought actually the US stock market is doomed because of the upcoming recession, as Mr. Musk put on Twitter yesterday, the recession that's coming in the second half of the year, following his little spat with President Trump. If you thought, well, markets are going to tank again, then going short is obviously an option up here with stops above those all-time highs. That the risk reward on that would be a good trade, assuming we don't take out the all-time highs. So that's interesting. But I think overall, I'm still a buyer of the dip, personally. There was a bit of a wobble yesterday in the market. I mean, it got knocked back. It only got knocked back to where it was on Tuesday. So we went back to like a 2-day low yesterday. But here we are, up again. Quelle surprise. So for me, those trends are still strong. What can you say? That's it. I am a buyer of the dip in these markets. I mean, if we did see, we've had the bump off the payrolls. If we saw some weakness this afternoon, this is the Nasdaq now. This is at 21,750. Yesterday's in-session low was about 21,470. So not quite 300 points below where we are now. If we saw this Nasdaq under pressure this afternoon, I think that's quite an interesting trade. Looking to be a buyer of the dip there. But, overall, my view on stock markets has not changed. The recovery from the April lows is still going strong. Let's see where it stops. That's it. The DAX, the German market, all-time highs yesterday. Same on this. I'd be a buyer of the dip of the DAX. Pretty volatile. When was that? A week last Friday. That was on the tariffs, wasn't it? The tariff thing. It's all tariff stuff. It all ends up being a bit of a one-day wonder, doesn't it? And then markets just carry on. Is that something that's going to come back and bite markets later in the year? I don't know. But at the moment, markets don't really care, or it's priced in. Whatever. But for me on the DAX, I'd be a buyer of the dip. On the DAX, it would take some quite big moves in these markets to change the overall trends. Here's the daily on the DAX. It broke out to fresh all-time highs about 3 or 4 weeks ago now. If the market dipped below 23.2, then perhaps it starts looking like a false breakout. But that's 1,000 points away from where this market's trading now. 4% away, 4 or 5% away from where the market is now. So overall, I still think they look positive. So that's that. FTSE, even the boring FTSE is getting a bit of a move on. So fresh recovery highs for the FTSE today, within 100 points of the all-time high of the FTSE. That's interesting. See if that gets taken out. I mean, the FTSE in the past, when it breaks out, we hardly get much momentum, do we? That was the breakout in Feb 23. There you go, didn't last long. And then a breakout in April 24. That did have a bit of a run. And then the breakout earlier this year, and then of course all the craziness since then. So interesting to see what happens with the FTSE next week. But these markets are still strong. I think the Aussie index not quite breaking out, but only 70 points away from its all-time high from Feb this year. The French is gone a bit boring. Spanish, I've got a Spanish index ETF in my pension. So let's hope that goes crazy. But, a great trend in the Spanish index since October 22. Japanese, is that still looking a bit different? I mean, the Japanese, is the one market at the moment where I would think about, if I had to go short a stock market, it would be the Nikkei 225. Because the trend had been down from Jan. And if I was going short, I'd put a stop above whatever that high was, at least there. Let's call it 39,000. But yeah, a bit more sideways in the old Nikkei recently. But that's it. What about the Hong Kong? Hong Kong Hang Seng. It's been a bit sideways as well. But overall, that big trend is still up. So there we go. Stock markets still positive for my money. So that's it. Yeah. Let's take a look at gold and silver. Gold, I was in gold. I can't remember when I bought it. I came out yesterday in gold. I bought it down here somewhere. So I bought it a week last Tuesday. I think at 32.95, something like that. It was against me, blah, blah, blah. Then it was in my favour, and I came out. So I made, I don't know, about $80 on that gold on the move, $80 on the move. If you look at that, the last 6 weeks on gold, it is all still a bit sideways. I'd be a buyer of a bigger dip if we got back below 3,300. Obviously, the big trend on gold is still up. So if in that time frame, absolutely a buyer of gold in the bigger time frame. But it's been a bit sideways since we had the all-time high. I mean, it's still up a bucket load for the year. Let's ask ChatGPT how much it thinks gold is up. How much is gold up this year in percent? Here we go. Oh, come on, I can do it quicker than this. Where did it end the year? 2,600, and it's 33.47. So it's 700, isn't it? So 25%. 27 to 29%. The old AI reckons. So it's still had a good year, even though it's been a bit sideways since April, and that big trend is still up. So same old for me on gold. Bigger trend, buyer of the dip. Short term, it's perhaps a bit too sideways. But what is interesting, which I have missed, the breakout in silver. Now, silver is a market. They do love a conspiracy theory, the old silver investors, the long-term silver investors. I remember I did a video many years ago on JP Morgan's cornering of the silver market. And this would have been, when would it have been? Maybe 2017? And it was all about how basically JP Morgan are buying all the silver. I can't remember the story about it, but and they did have to pay a fine of 920 million for manipulating the precious metals market in September 2020. But it's all about how the price of silver was artificially being kept down. But here we are. Look at that, silver at the best levels since early 2012, 13-year high in silver. Interesting to see what happens here. Yeah, the trend has been up. This latest bit of the trend for the last year, it's just been a bit sideways since October, but breakout again this week. So that's interesting. Is this the start of a run by silver back to $50? That was, I can even remember when that happened. There was a royal wedding on when that happened, April 2011. I think it was Prince William. I don't know. But I remember having one eye on the royal wedding and one eye on silver making record highs. There you go. It's exciting life. So interesting break this week. I'd rather wait to see if it sells off. Where does the sell-off stop? But I think that's an interesting market to watch next week, silver, because of the break we've had this week. While we're on the subject of funny money and conspiracy theories, let's have a look at the world of crypto. Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, we had this move in Bitcoin to all-time highs, up to 112. Interestingly, it only lasted a couple of days and then it reversed. So you could take the view, well, it's a false break, go short, stops above 112. Me, I would still be inclined to be a buyer of the dip. The trend on Bitcoin is still up in the bigger picture. That's interesting. 100k held. That would have been where I'd had my stop, the other side of 100k. And I'd still do that on silver, on Bitcoin. So quite a big bounce over the last less than a day, isn't it? Last night it was down there. Was that with Elon and Mr. Trump, President Trump falling out? Who knows? But I think that's interesting. 100k so far is proving to be a bit of a line in the sand for Bitcoin. So I'd still be a buyer in the bigger picture point of view. We'll have a look. I saw Richard mention it. Palladium and Platinum. I missed the move in Palladium this week. It was I mentioned it in the WhatsApp group and I didn't do it. Palladium, big picture view, it's all a bit boring, right? There's the chart of Palladium going back a year and a half now. So big, wide, sideways range, and that's it ultimately. But on the hourlies, we've had a great trend since early April. So this is the hourly chart of Palladium. Traded as high as 1,050 a week last Wednesday, 1,040, whatever it was. Sold off, and I wanted to be a buyer this week. I thought I'd be a buyer of that, but it moved a bit too quick for me. I missed it. I should have bought it on Friday. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. And it rallied. It's about $100. It's interesting, isn't it? It's at the top of the range since November. Let's call it 1,050 is the top of the range. Are we going to see it break out? We're going to see a breakout in Palladium. Why is it going up? Let's ask GPT. Why is Palladium going up? Because from memory, isn't Palladium the thing that's used in catalytic converters and stuff? That's one application of it, isn't it? But I mean, it's been a big move, so it's up 150, so about 15% off those April lows. Yeah, it's saying automotive demand for catalytic converters, supply pressure from sanctions and limited output, and blah 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 sanctions. There we go. That's it. Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting market to watch next week. I would absolutely buy the dip in Palladium. Interesting to see if it breaks out as well, what happens with that. So that's an interesting one. Platinum, that's going as well, isn't it? I mean, that is, for me, that I don't look at these very often because the daily charts, they're just all a bit messy, aren't they? So that's platinum over the last 2.5 years now. And so it's at a fresh multi-year high. So that's another interesting one. Do we see a continued breakout in platinum next week, or does it end up being a false break? Let's see. Let's see what happens. So they're ones to watch next week. I don't know what I would do. I think Palladium, Palladium, I think for me has got perhaps the better trend, but it would need a big dip for me to buy it. So I might have missed the boat a bit on Palladium. So that's that. Oil, is oil breaking out? Yes, it is. Because oil's another one. It's been a little bit boring over only the last 2 or 3 weeks. But here we are on a breakout. I should have bought that last week as well. That was a reasonably good trade. The quick break below the old support ends up being a false break, and the market's moved higher. So that's maybe an interesting one for next week. There's still another barrier for oil, I would say, just above 65. If you look on the dailies, it's all a bit boring over the last couple of months. That 65 is a big level though. 65, let's call it 65.50 on my chart. The highs from April. If that breaks, that could be interesting. But just bearing in mind that the big trend in oil, if we go back to Ukraine invasion, March 22, so we go back 3 years, and the big trend in oil is most definitely still down. So interesting to see how that all pans out, I think. But absolutely strong in the short term, oil. But again, if you wanted to go short, it's an interesting level to go short. It's only 70 cents away from that high in April. So going short with, I don't know, a $2 stop could be an option if you thought this was a bit of a false break. What's driven that? Is that payrolls driven or something else? Something else driven, that is. Doesn't say why. Okay. Yeah, so let's see what happens with that one. Natural gas, is that still a bit? Yeah, still a bit boring, natural gas. I'd still be a buyer of the dip. This 285, 287 level, the lows from December, has proved to be support. So that's that. Not too much going on there. Dollar index. I think the dollar index is interesting. There's absolutely an argument to be a buyer or a seller. The argument for being a seller of the dollar is the trend has been down all this year, and it made a new low for the move at the end of April. The argument for being a buyer is this was a big level it pushed through. This was an 18-month low. And we've not had much follow through, and it has held again more recently. So are we going to see a bit of a turnaround in the dollar? I don't know. The aggressive trade would be to be a buyer, stops below that low from April. And that's an interesting trade, perhaps. But let's see what turns out there. But it's been strong today. I'm guessing that is off the payrolls, isn't it? A bit of dollar strength. So yeah, a bit of a mixed picture, but some interesting stuff. We had a bit of volatility yesterday. Oh, this Nasdaq really isn't looking back. Oh, and then even the S&P's put on 15 points since we started this. So yeah, US stock market's still strong. Global stock market's still strong overall. I am absolutely still a buyer of the dip on stock markets. So that's all interesting. Then we have this breakout in silver. What happens with that next week? Do we see more strength there, or is it a bit of a false break? And this breakout in oil today as well. What happens with that? Is that just going to run out of steam again, or are we seeing perhaps the start of a turnaround in the oil price? So what lots to watch. My favoured markets as usual for now will be stock market indices still. I don't have any trades on at the moment, so I've just come out of the last trade. I was long the Nasdaq and long gold going into yesterday, and I got profit stopped out of those, so I don't have any trades on. So I'll be looking to be a buyer of these US indices, but yeah, they need to probably sell off a bit for me to think about getting in. So that's that. If there's any stuff you want looking at, put it in now. Quick commercial break. I run a WhatsApp group. I do a daily update in the morning. I talk about markets I'm watching, trades I've got running, where I've got in, where my stop is. A Q&A if anyone's got any questions throughout the day, to fire them in. We'll have a look at Lululemon in a minute, actually. If you want to sign up, the link is in the description. You can try it for a month, see what you think. If you use the code YouTube, you get 20% off the first month. Most people stay in there for many months, so I'm glad they like it and they value it. I enjoy doing it. And I run a webinar every month for the WhatsApp people. The next one, I think I'll do it next Thursday. But the most recent one, I talked about my approach to day trading indices, particularly US indices, where to place stops, why entry is not the be-all and end-all, how to quickly decide on a trade, managing the position, all of that. If you join the WhatsApp group, you get a link to the recorded version of that. And that is well worth a 40 quid subscription for 1 month of anybody's money, because I do know what I'm talking about. So that's that. So join the WhatsApp group. I run a trading course as well. Details on the website, davidjonestrading.co.uk. And finally, to find out who I trade with and open an account and try them, go to bit.ly/DavidTrade. So all this stuff is in the description. If you've got any questions, drop me an email, dj@davidjonestrading.co.uk. Happy to answer any questions. Okay, that's that. Let's take a quick look at some of the stuff you want looking at. Let's look at Lululemon. So Lululemon got hit last night off their earnings, I think. I think they have. Oh, yeah, they really did, didn't they? And remember these had a great trend and hit all-time highs last year, because I was thinking about buying them. And then they had their earnings, you can see their earnings there, continue to disappoint. Now this is the, what do you call it, athletic wear, athleisure, whatever it is, leisure wear, isn't it? Leggings and yoga pants and all that doodah. I'm sure that's not the official description, but they got absolutely hit March last year from 480 down to 415, and they've just been going lower, lower, lower. And I thought it was interesting. They did make a base in April off the old lows from August, recovered really well from 240 to 340, so a 40% move. And they got taken a big hit overnight. So they were 330 yesterday's close, earnings out last night, and here they are at 270. So what's that? $60 down, 20% down. But that's an interesting one. From an individual stock point of view, I think that's an interesting one from last night. For next week, sorry, to see, because I'd be a buyer of the dip to see, does the old 225 lows hold? Let's have a look. Let's have a look at the old Tesla as well. So Tesla, I think, is that due to the spat? Due to removing the EV subsidy, whatever. But the big trend for Tesla, going back over the years, is still up. And we had this crazy move from the US election last year, where it pretty much, not quite, but almost doubled in price, from $250 to almost $500. Came all the way back down to it in March. Lots of calls for Mr. Musk to go back to running the company, managing the company, and not so much the government stuff he was doing. I still be a buyer of the dip in Tesla. I think it's interesting if it comes under a bit more pressure from here. But that's that. Let's have a look at what you want to look at. So Tenerife Kev says the South African stock market index. What's it called? South African top 40. Should we go with that? Oh, look at that. We've clearly looked at this before because I've drawn a trend line on it. But that is a great trend from March 2020, so the COVID lows. So where was it at the COVID lows? Just below 34,000 to 88,000 and a bit today. It's amazing, isn't it? So the sell-off, I mean, what's it bounced back from the sell-off? So let's call it 71 to 88, or nearly 89. So it's done 18,000. So it's about, what, 25% bounce back from the sell-off. Where would you put your stop? Good question. So we've broken out, haven't we? If I was going off the daily chart, I would have my stop the other side of that breakout point. The other side of 83 is where I'd have my stop. It's been a fairly relentless ride up, isn't it? So, yeah, stop the other side of 83. So I'd rather buy a dip. I mean, it was a nice little setup, though. Breaks out, comes back, retests the old high, and bang, bang, bang. Off we go. That's another trade. Another woulda, shoulda, coulda trade there. But that was interesting. But for me, I would absolutely be the other side of that level. Looking on the hourlies, if I wanted a more aggressive stop, the other side of 86.3, something like that, off the hourlies maybe. So yeah, what an interesting chart. Let's add that. Let's add that one into the watch list. What's it called? South Africa. Top 40. Keep an eye on that one. Let's just move it up to my little index section. SA40. There we go. Yeah, interesting chart. SPOL on the LSE, a Poland index ETF. Okay, SPOL. SPOL. Okay, MSCI Poland. All right, let's have a look. What do we think? Got an idea? God, that is volatile, isn't it? So it touched. What did it touch? These are pounds, I guess, aren't they? £20.40 in March. Sells off to 14.50. So a 30% drop and back up again. I mean, it's a funny one, isn't it? I mean, I'd be a buyer because of the breakout. I mean, it broke, it has taken out the high from earlier in the year, which is a positive. I would struggle a bit where to put my stop loss because I wouldn't want it as far as down here, the April lows, because it's a long way away. Maybe the other side of 18 quid, maybe, would probably be the tightest I'd want it. So yeah, I never looked at that before. That's an interesting one, the old SPOL. So yeah, I'd be a buyer. And the closest I want my stop, the other side of 18, if not 17. So yeah, let's see. Let's come back to the one in a month and see what it's done. Can we have a look at pound against the dollar? Yeah, I forgot to look at the individual currencies. Pound against the dollar hit a multi-year high yesterday. Here we go. Best levels since Feb 22. The only problem is, of course, it's what's the dollar going to do? But and the dollar is all a bit flip-flop at the moment. But look, if you looked at the pound in isolation, pound against the dollar, the trend has been up for the last 3 weeks. So if I had to do anything, I'd be a buyer. And the only question is, where does your stop go? My stop would go at least the other side of this Tuesday's low, 134.90, if not a bit further away, 134.40. So I'd be, because of that trend, and it did hit a multi-year high yesterday, so it shows there is strength there. I'd be a buyer of the pound against the dollar. The only question is, and it's a big one, where does my stop go? So yes, that's that. But that's an interesting one as well, pound against the dollar. Yeah, so I would buy the dip on that. I think you just said you tend to trade indices rather than stocks. I go through stages of trading stocks. I did a lot of stock trading last year. These are some of the ones that I did have left over until recently. And I will, if the US market breaks out to all-time highs again, I'll go back into trading stocks. But when I say trading, I tend to run them, if it goes well, I run them for months. Like TJX, I was in this one. I bought TJX, I can't even remember, June last year. And I was still in it until March this year because the trend was up. Costco, I was in that last year for a little bit. So yeah, I do trade stocks. And obviously from an investment point of view, I do have some stocks in ISAs and SIPs, even though I'm mainly ETFs. So yeah. But it's the same, for me, it's the same rules. It's just go with the trend. Broadbridge, I was in that one for a bit last year. Good trend. What else? Visa was doing well for me. Oh yeah, I bought that one in. That did really well. I bought that in early January. Visa at I don't know 320, let's say, and it ran up to 360. So and it's still strong again. So there's always interesting individual stocks. What's Netflix doing? Oh, it's still going. Netflix, amazing, all-time highs again yesterday. I was in that one for a bit last year. Came out of it. I came out of it in the summer. Never got back in. Yeah. You mentioned coffee Robusta in the WhatsApp group. Would you be a buyer? Did I mention that yesterday? Didn't I? And I was thinking it was interesting. Where is it? Coffee Robusta. Should have bought it yesterday. I need more conviction. I think I thought I had enough trades on. Coffee Robusta has had the coffees. Have had a really good run. If you go back to April 21. So let's go back 4 years. Coffee was $1,300, whatever it is, or whatever. So 1,300. This year it was nearly 6,000. So we've seen a big move in coffee over the years, and it's been a good trend. We've had a good trend, particularly since November 23. We've seen the price double and a bit more in 18 months, and it's sold off. But the thing I was wondering in the WhatsApp group, were we going to see a bit of a bounce from where we were early in the week? So I would still be a buyer. I would want my stop the other side of 4,100. These lows from June last year. So that's my thinking on that one at the moment. Okay, we've had this good run in coffee. Are we going to have another go at 6,000 in coffee? That for me would be the trade. And it's an interesting trade in terms of risk reward down here. So that trend has definitely run out of steam over the last few months. But that 4,100 still stays very much intact, doesn't it? So yeah, that's that. So yeah, I'd still be a buyer. And that's it, I think, isn't it? That's it for today. What are these markets doing? They've calmed down a little bit. There's the S&P. Nasdaq's 21.8. That'd be interesting to see what happens with these US markets and dollar as well, all of that stuff. So plenty to watch, I think, going into next week. I feel like it's been perhaps a bit of a boring couple of weeks. I mean, there've been opportunities there. We've still had good trends in these stock markets, and for me, they're still going. So that's interesting to see. Do these recoveries continue next week? We've got the breakout in silver, blah, blah, blah. How does that go next week? Are all the silver bugs going to be rewarded, or are they going to face disappointment again due to some evil conspiracy that sees the price fall? Let's see what happens next week with silver. So lots to watch. I'll be back next week as usual. Join the WhatsApp group. Try that out. Well worth it, I think. It only costs you 40 quid for the first month, and you do get access to the webinar from a week ago or 2 weeks ago, which was good. To find out who I trade with, go to there. Any questions, drop me an email. And I do training courses as well. I don't talk about this very much at the moment. I need to revamp my website, but it's all on the website. Have a look, see what you think. Don't lose all your money, and hopefully see you next Friday. It's not a holiday or anything, is it? No. Be back next Friday. Good luck with your trading. Thanks for coming along. See you then. If you can click like and all the usual stuff, that'd be great. Okay, have a good weekend.